Right, here are the paints you're supposed to be using to paint your terrain with, right? Wrong. That's more like it. Right, yes, I've got a whole bunch of paints here that are miniature or quality paints that you're not supposed to use to paint your gaming terrain, but that's a bit of a false economy. I do get the idea of not using too many expensive products over large areas, which is probably very true, and it's definitely what I do. I use a lot of spray cans, rattle cans, and the paints that I just showed you. However, for some effects and some things that you're going to paint, the extra cost, which isn't always massive of some of these items, is well worth the time saving and the quality. It actually nets out possibly to be cheaper depending on how you want to look at it. So let's take a look at some of these individually. Right, first up, let's look at metallics, because honestly, this stuff has absolutely no coverage. That's the nicest way I can phrase it. So I'm using the Vallejo products. Now these are about £2 something a bottle. And they're really, really good for coverage. Also, I'm using these diorama paints, dry brushing from Ammo MIG. They're £3 something, but you get 40 mils, and you'll see in a second just how far they go. Now, as amazing as their coverage is, these silvers are way too bright. So I mixed them 40-60 with black acrylic paint, and that makes it go a lot further and gets you the right color and good application. So let's have a quick look at that. Let me just mix them up in an old base that I use, and I could even have gone a bit darker here, but you'll get the idea. So a bit more black paint would have done. And then this is the coverage you get. So this is just a primed sprue frame. You get really immediate solid base coat. No need to go over it again and again and again, which is frustrating and time consuming. There you go. If you're doing this over a large metallic bulkhead section or something like that, you know, you're going to get really good coverage straight away. And if you think about your time as money, this is a pretty good saving. Right, it's dried nicely, so we just take a little bit of the silver paint and dry brush it over the top, just to give you an idea. Now this hasn't had a wash, but you can see already it's coming out nice and bright, especially here on the numbers. And if I actually went over just a black area, you could even just do this over a black paint. I mean, that's going to get you a nice metallic look. Let's do it on this shoulder pad for a tighten here. Let's do it on this shoulder pad here. Very rough and ready. You can see even this over black gives you a nice little gunmetal coat quite quickly and perfect for terrain. You do a wash, another highlight, and you get some nice contrast. So the amount of coverage you get means that this couple of quid bottle, which is about the same price as one of these, yes, this has massive coverage, but the amount of time you'll save using a product like this is definitely well worth it. Next up, I'm going to show you these Dio paints from Ammo MIG. They got amazing coverage, so I'll just do this straight over black. A tiny touch of it. It's got this gel-like consistency almost. I'm doing this heavy as a base coat. This is supposed to be for dry brushing, but as far as a base coat goes, like you're painting metal objects, pipes and things, that's going to get that done in no time. And we let that dry and come in with the bright highlight. I'll actually just do this over black to show you just how effective it is, but very light dry brushing, boom, done. Now if I want to, that's a heavy coat, if I want to do a super light dry brush, here I can just pick the edges like this. You get a really nice dry brush effect really, really quickly. So these, again, well worth it in my opinion. Next up, one of the toughest colours to manage, and that is white. This stuff needs about 66 coats in order to get you anything, and it's awful. However, I found massive success using Corax White from GW. You need to be a bit sparing with this, so what you could possibly do is actually do a coat of grey with an acrylic paint first, and then a light coat of this over the top. But this goes very, very, very far. It's highly pigmented, and if you're really going for white, you cannot beat this one. I've just started using this Pro Acryl titanium white, and we'll put just a little drop down here to test it. Right, and a little drop to test it. You can see I've got barely any there. Get it on the brush and go over something, and it's very white very quickly. Now obviously it's grey here because I'm putting it straight over black, but I'm going to let that dry and do a second coat. Right, second coat of the top, and there that white is just leaping off, and you've got that done in almost no time at all. So again, may cost a little more in terms of the amount of product you're getting, but the amount of coverage you're getting and the speed with which you can get your terrain done, which is the real win, you really can't beat this sort of high pigmented paint. So just selecting it for the right jobs is what's key. Right, now we're moving into the really expensive paints, and I definitely wouldn't go out of my way to buy these for doing terrain, but there's definitely some great uses for these. So step one, Worth looking at the red browns, so Gorgunter and Snakebite Leather I think it is. They're amazing for doing brass work, which I'll show you in a sec. And then the bright colours are really, really good for glow effects if you're doing any plasma coils and that sort of thing. These are going to get the job done fast. And you might find you need a bit of technical medium sometimes, but again, you don't really need this stuff. You can kind of do without that. I'm going to show you this silver piece that we've done here. If you've got some pipes and things on a piece that you've painted silver and you want to pick them out to make them look brassy, honestly, all you've got to do is paint a very thin layer of this over the top. You don't need a lot, because you want the shine to still come through from the pipes underneath. You can be quite rough with it. Again, you're not trying to get the contrast, you're actually trying to tint the metals, and look, there you go, that's got a nice brassiness to it. And here we've got a really good example of what it looks like when it starts to dry. You can really see that it's tinted that a nice brassy colour, perfect for picking out pipes. Next up on the docket, pigment powders. So I've got a variety of different companies, manufacturers, they're all pretty much the same. They are definitely worth getting. You will see people use pastel chalks and things like that. They do work and they do a good job, but you can't do as much with them and they're not as vibrant. These are so punchy when you use them right, which we'll do right now. And while we're on the subject, I use this Winsor & Newton Sensador, whatever. It's an odourless thinner for artworking, and it's really good to use inside because nobody complains about the smells. Right, I've got this ladder that I've worked on that's got all the dark colours and the rusts and lumps and chunks and things, but it needs a little bit of pop. So what we do is just using a little bit of thinner, you just get the tiniest touch, and this is why these last forever. Honestly, this Forge World one I must have had for over 10 years, still haven't gotten through it. So you thin it down quite a lot, and this is because it's very, very punchy. With a bit of the spirits, flow it into the recesses, and yeah, we'll take a look at that when it's dried. It goes from dark to very, very punchy. And here's why the pigment powders are worth it, because I've got the bright orange now, and I'm just going to come in and dab that in some of the corners here, and you'll see when it dries just how much that stands out and why it's better than chalks. Right, and while that pigment dries, we're going to talk about oil paints. So it is not worth buying the super, super expensive oil paints. They can be very, very, very pricey. These Winsor & Newton Winton, I think the Dale Rowney do a graduate one. They are the mid-level products, and that's what we want. We don't want the super fine expensive stuff because that really isn't worth it. You don't want the super cheap stuff because the grain size of the pigments tends to be too big and you see it. So these mid-priced ones are the way to go, and you really don't need a lot with these. A little bit goes a very long way, so I will just take a tiny little bit out of the tube like that. And if you're doing a large piece of terrain, obviously you'd put this in a pot, maybe a big squirt of it with a load of spirits and mix up a wash. It does a great job, and this goes very, very far. So you can see I put quite a bit of spirit in there. I'm just going to mix this into a black wash, and we're just going to put this over a test piece to see how this goes. Right, I'm coming back to the ladder that's now dried because this isn't Blue Peter. You can see it's really intense orange, crusty, dry looking effect in here versus what it was when I put washes and stuff over the top previously. If you don't like this, the beauty of these is you can take a brush that's got some white spirit on there and you can start knocking it back by taking some of it off, or you can abrade it with a stiff brush before you put the final sealer on, and overall you get this really vibrant effect that you just can't get without pigments. And again, you're only using a tiny amount in selective spaces to really make your terrain stand out. Right, so I forgot to record myself cleaning up the other one, so I've got another piece here that I've put a slightly thicker black wash on. You can see it's going into recesses, and what I did was I just tapped it with a towel, a paper towel, while it was drying, and now we're going to clean this up completely to show what you can do. So if you look here, you can see that you've got nice black lining without any visible pigment particles, and this is why it's worth buying the mid-tier oil paints. Get a much better result. Right, it's not enough to just talk about that, so let's just do a quick worked example with some time-lapsing. I have got a piece here that I've sprayed with a silver, but I'm not really happy with how this silver looks. It wasn't a great spray paint, it hasn't done a very good job around here, so we'll sort that out. Stage 1, metallic base coat, the black and the silver mixed together. Right, you can see that did not take long. It's given me a really good base coat here. Normally I would hit it with the black wash now, with the oils, but in order to actually get this video done on time, I'm going to do that as the last step because it does take quite a while to dry. So next up we're going to go in with some dry brushing. Right, and it hasn't taken long, and it's given us a nice second silver in here, which is kind of hard to see on camera actually, but if you had the wash on here, the contrast would be extremely noticeable between the black and the silver, which I will show you at the end. So next up, we need to jazz this up a bit. These pipes are a bit boring, so we need to make some of them brass. Right, that's just going to dry, so I'll be careful, and we're going to add some visual popping now to this to make it really stand out on the table. So cue painting a few things white. I am feeling blue for this plasma go, and as you can see when I was painting it, I was a bit messy around the edges, and that was deliberate because that adds a kind of glow effect. So put this stuff on pretty generously, and then just move it around and get it up on the sides, not over the top, but up on the sides, using the side of the brush of where it is that you're painting this to get kind of a cool blue glowy effect. If it goes too far, you can actually feather it with your finger pretty easily, and this takes no time at all. Right, nice vibrant blue in very, very little work. This would have taken quite a while with acrylic. So we're going to get our white again. This white is insanely strong, so make sure you do get a lot of it off and test it on your hand. Don't use your hand, use some paper or something, and I'm going to just gently go over the top like this. Then this is bordering on over brushing at this point, but I'm just going to put a white streak in the middle here because I really like how this looks. It makes it look like it's actually got a glow going on. And while I've got the thinners out for the oil wash that I've just done, this textured rusting around the bottom here, that was just the brown Vallejo paste. I'm going to go back with the pigment powder that I'd already used in the previous example. I'm going to thin that quite a lot with some of the spirit. I really don't need a lot of this orange. And then again, I'm just going to put some flowing underneath here. So I'll hold it up so you can see. We're just going to put a little bit. It doesn't look like much now, but the key is to get the hang of this, and less is more. You can always add in extra washes, but trying to take the pigments off once they're on there in the recesses is very difficult, and they do get very bright when they're dry. So let's come back when this is done. Right, and here we're done. It didn't use that many materials really when you think about it, and the outcome here is nicer, I think, than if you just used complete bargain basement product, and it certainly was faster. I mean, you can see this took me not really much working time at all, a little bit of drying time, but that's the same with everything. Especially this blue and white, I think this would have taken so many layers in acrylic paints without using model paints, and the wash has come out really, really nice, and this silver is nice, dirty, industrial silver, and this hack to do the brass piping is definitely the way forwards. But overall, I think this on your tabletop looks perfect, and that really is the goal here, is to get good looking tabletop terrain. So if you can do all the algorithm feeding down here, and tune in again next time. Cheers guys.